Officer Reed smirked, sipping his coffee. Just an hour ago, he humiliated a black woman at a bus stop. But when the station doors swung open, his grin vanished. She walked in, tall, composed, and flanked by the deputy chief. Then came the words that made his stomach drop. "Meet your new captain." But what happened next, he never saw coming. The summer heat pressed down on the city, turning the pavement into a shimmering mirage. At a bus stop in downtown, a black woman stood, dressed in a crisp navy blue suit, holding a folder of documents. Her posture was upright, her expression composed. A police cruiser pulled up to the curb. Officer Daniel Reed, a broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s with a perpetual smirk, rolled down the window. He glanced at the woman and scoffed. "Hey, you can't stand here. Move along," he ordered lazily. The woman turned her head, unfazed. "I'm waiting for the bus." Reed chuckled. "You sure you can afford a bus ticket, sweetheart?" His voice dripped with mockery. She arched a brow. "Excuse me?" Reed stepped out of the car, towering over her. The other pedestrians at the stop shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. "You got ID?" he demanded. She narrowed her eyes. "On what grounds?" "That tone won't help you, lady," Reed sneered. "Let's see some ID, or I'll have to assume you're loitering." Anger flared in her chest, but she remained calm. "I know my rights." Reed laughed. "Oh, she knows her rights. Listen, sweetheart, you're in my city, and I decide who has rights. Now, you either show me some ID, or I'll bring you down to the station for resisting a lawful order." The woman exhaled sharply, reaching into her bag. Reed yanked it from her hands before she could pull out her wallet. "Hands where I can see 'em," he barked, and suddenly, all eyes were on them. The humiliation burned through her skin as she stood motionless, her fists clenched. She locked eyes with him, her gaze steady, unyielding. He smirked. "That's better. Now, run along." She inhaled slowly, collecting herself, then turned on her heel and walked away, head high. She didn't need to waste her time on a power-drunk bully. She had bigger things to handle. 1 hour later, Reed leaned back in his chair at the station, lazily sipping his burnt coffee, his boots propped up on the desk. The morning had been slow, uneventful. That little scene at the bus stop had been the most entertainment he'd had all day. Putting entitled nobodies in their place always gave him a sense of satisfaction. Then, the station doors swung open. The usual hum of office chatter died instantly. Officers at their desks stopped mid-task. Others straightened their posture as if on instinct. The shift in the air was palpable, thick with something unspoken. Reed frowned and turned his head. And there she was, the woman from the bus stop. The same measured stride, the same composed expression, the same unwavering confidence that had irritated him earlier. But now, there was something else. A weight behind her presence that hadn't been there before. She wasn't alone. The precinct's deputy chief walked beside her. Reed's stomach lurched. His boots hit the floor as he scrambled upright, the coffee cup nearly slipping from his grip. His mind raced for an explanation. Was this some kind of complaint? An investigation? But then he saw it. The way every officer in the room stood a little straighter, the way their eyes tracked her movements with something close to respect. No, 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 no. The deputy chief cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the thick silence. "Everyone, meet your new captain." Reed barely heard the rest. Captain Maya Caldwell. The words hit him like a gut punch. She scanned the room, her gaze steady, assessing. Then, for the briefest moment, her eyes landed on him. A flicker of recognition, a knowing glint. His throat tightened. But she didn't say a word. No smirk, no pointed comment. no immediate revenge. Instead, she turned, extended her hand to the deputy chief, and smiled. "I look forward to working with you all," she said smoothly. Her voice was steady, professional. Not an ounce of pettiness, not a hint of the anger he expected. Reed swallowed hard. This wasn't happening. But the knot forming in his gut told him otherwise. For the next few days, Reed barely spoke. The usual bravado, the offhanded jokes, the smug remarks, the casual swagger, was gone. He kept his head down, avoided unnecessary conversations, and, most importantly, stayed out of Caldwell's way. Every time he saw her walking through the station, his stomach twisted into knots. She didn't acknowledge him, didn't glare, didn't smirk. And somehow, that made it worse. He told himself she had bigger things to deal with. New leadership came with enough challenges, policy changes, department meetings, establishing control. She wouldn't waste time on him. But that illusion shattered faster than he expected. "Officer Reed." Her voice carried through the precinct like a gavel striking wood. A few heads turned. Officers exchanged glances. No one said a word. Reed's palms were already damp when he pushed himself up from his desk. His walk to her office felt longer than it should have. His heartbeat pounded in his ears as he stepped inside and shut the door behind him. Caldwell stood by the window, arms crossed, staring out at the city. She didn't turn right away. The silence stretched, pressing against him like a weight. When she finally faced him, her expression was unreadable. "Do you know why I called you in?" Reed cleared his throat. No, ma'am." She didn't blink. "I think you do." A tightness gripped his chest. He forced out a weak chuckle. "Look, I didn't know who you were." Caldwell leaned against her desk, folding her hands. "So, if I were just another black woman waiting for a bus, that behavior would have been acceptable?" The air in the room felt thinner. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "You humiliated me in public. You assumed I was beneath you." Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. The kind that didn't need to be loud to be dangerous. "That kind of officer has no place under my command." His stomach twisted. I was just doing my job." Caldwell raised a brow. "Were you?" Silence. Then, she exhaled, shaking her head slightly. "I don't need apologies, Reed. I need better cops." The finality of those words landed like a hammer to his chest. "This is your only warning. If I see another incident like that, you won't just be suspended. You'll be out of uniform permanently." Reed's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Caldwell studied him for a moment longer. Then, with a simple nod, she dismissed him. He turned and walked out, feeling the weight of every step. For the first time in his career, something gnawed at him. Not anger, not resentment, shame. Weeks passed. Caldwell proved herself to be a force. Officers who once ruled with unchecked arrogance now followed protocol with precision. She was firm, but fair. She made changes that no one had dared to push before. And Reed? Reed kept his head down, but he saw her. Every day, she carried herself with the same quiet power. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't gloat. She just did her job. And that, somehow, made it worse. One evening, he caught himself hesitating before addressing a young black man on the street. Old habits clawed at him. But then he heard her voice in his head. "I don't need apologies. I need better cops." He let out a breath and did what he should have done all along. He treated the kid with respect. And for the first time, Officer Reed felt something else. Change.